The Lusitanian army invades Mariam, one of the Pars' allies, in 317. King Andragoras III of Pars decides to assist his ally by commanding a force of 300,000 men to crush the Lusitanian army. They build a mountain out of the bodies of the Lusitanian soldiers. Varys, the supreme commander, instructs Prince Arslan, the crown prince of Pars, in the palace. Prince Arslan is making little progress and is struggling to keep his position as Varys gains the upper hand. He advises him to become more serious and familiar with such things, so that he can improve his fighting skills and perform better in combat. Nonetheless, Arslan is being cared for by two maids while conversing with Varys. He complains about how boring training is and questions Varys about why he did not accompany the king. He claims that it is his responsibility to keep an eye on the royal capital of Ecbatana while the monarch is away. Soon after, Varys directs him to meet the queen. When he arrives, the queen mother, also known as Tahamne, greets him. He makes an effort to pursue her and start a conversation, despite not fully understanding what she said. But she doesn't seem to care what he has to say. What does it mean to be a good king? He wonders. While Arslan and Varys stroll through the palace, Kishward, one of Pars' cavalry captains, approaches them. He informs the prince of their victory and the king's return. The people of Pars are overjoyed, and they brighten the atmosphere of the arrival with victory cheers. One of the Persian boys notices a young boy taken prisoner by the Lusitanian army. He then questions his friend about why such a young boy was allowed to go to war in the first place, but receives no response. So Arslan is overjoyed to see his father and inform him of his safe return. Nonetheless, his father is hostile to him and insists that defeat was never an option. Later that day, Arslan travels to Ecbatana with an accomplice from the palace who is concerned about the prince's safety. As a result of this move, trouble is brewing. Arslan, on the other hand, is unconcerned as he makes his way through Ecbatana's slave quarters, intending to question Lusitanians on his own. He tries to speak with one of them, but they insist on keeping him locked up. Meanwhile, Edoil, the kidnapped child, is being held in a small cage in a section of the quarters that is enclosed. Three young Parsi lads put him there in an attempt to correct him for rejecting Parsi culture, but the correction backfires on them as he beats them up. Edoil manages to break free and flee after beating up the Persian boys. Arslan, unfortunately, follows the sound of the guys until he runs into Edoil, who immediately threatens to kill one of the Persian boys if Arslan approaches them. When Arslan agrees, Edoil abandons the boy and pursues him instead, capturing him and leading him on a chase outside of the quarters. In order to save Arslan, Parsian armies pursue Edoil, despite the fact that Arslan saved Edoil's life by preventing him from falling off a giraffe, which would have killed him. When they were on the run, Edoil opens Arslan's eyes to many things about his people in a harsh manner. Daryun, the cavalry captain, finally catches up with Edoil and attempts to shoot an arrow at him after a long pursuit. Edoil avoids the arrow by grabbing one of the stray horses and riding away. Arslan prevents him from aiming to the right, allowing Edoil to flee the scene. While Arslan is on his way to the palace that evening, the Persian armies bring the three Persian boys responsible for Edoil's escape to Arslan for judgment. After hearing their case, Arslan decides that the boys should be released. They are overjoyed and express their gratitude, swearing that they will serve in the cavalry when they are much older. Meanwhile, Daryun wishes to meet with one of his friends who can assist, but Arslan claims that their town is safe as long as the king is alive. As a result, he claims it will be some time before he needs to meet with his friend. Varys and Arslan have been practicing inside the palace for 3 years when, all of a sudden, Varys receives a message informing him that he and Arslan must prepare for an impending battle. Arslan becomes concerned at the camp as the weather begins to deteriorate. Harlan, on the other hand, reassures him by stating that he has done sufficient research into the surrounding area. Arslan is accompanied by 3 friends, while the footmen under his supervision amble down to the fog-filled area. These 3 friends, it appears, are the 3 young people he did not kill 3 years ago. They kept their word and protected him just as they had promised. As Varys approaches, he warns them to stay close to the camp and not stray too far. Soon after, Varys receives word from a courier that the king is furious with Daryun, his nephew. He hastily makes his way to the camp with Arslan. Daryun advised the king to withdraw from the conflict because it could be a trap, and the king is so enraged that he strips Daryun of his title. However, after Varys makes a case for him, he restores it to him. When the time comes to fight, the horns sound, signaling everyone to take their positions. As a terrible disaster looms in the distance, the Persian armies make a determined charge toward them during the battle. However, it is a trap, and the armies end up falling off a cliff and into a dungeon. This was a strong charge that was difficult to break. Other armies are having difficulty stopping their armies from charging at this time. As a result, balls of fire are shot into the pit hole at the same time, killing the armies. They attempted to establish themselves in a different location, but it was too late for them to survive. The prince is surrounded by enemy forces and is on the verge of death when Daryun intervenes to save him. He does this to keep a promise he made to Varys when they first met. Surprisingly, Arslan decides to assassinate the prince. Arslan, on the verge of defeat, attempts to assassinate Arslan. Daryun, fortunately, comes to his aid, and Arslan decides to flee. Meanwhile, the king is forced to flee following the deaths of the other armies, and he tries to spread the word. However, Arslan's evil accomplice is able to silence the messengers. Arslan orchestrates the entire conflict as part of his plan to depose the king. The king and Varys return to town after taking the route of retreat, only to discover that they've been betrayed by an oncoming Lusitanian army. Varys charges forward to protect the king and successfully kills a few of the Lusitanian armies, but he is eventually killed by the silver-masked man, who seeks vengeance on Andragoras and his people. The king is concerned because unforeseen arrows are killing even his armies. Meanwhile, the silver-masked man is determined to exact his revenge. He claims that after 16 years of waiting, he can finally exact his revenge on Andragoras. The Persians attack Pars, and the kingdom loses many men in defense. Daryun and Arslan finally meet Narcissus, a powerful warlord, after some time has passed. When they finally meet, he welcomes them with open arms. Arslan, on the other hand, assigns his men to find Daryun and Arslan. They were reported to be heading in the direction of Narcissus' residence. Narcissus is able to conceal them and pretend that he did not see anyone in order to save them from capture. The soldiers inform Narcissus of Varys' death, and Arslan and Daryun, who have been hiding, are overcome with grief. When Narcissus flatly refuses the men's offer to join Arslan's army, they charge at him, unwittingly walking right into his trap. After much persuasion, Narcissus finally relents and agrees to help the prince. Prince Arslan, now an ally, sets out with Daryun and Narcissus. Back in the camp, the Lusitanian army tortures Ecbatana's General Shapur in front of his people. General Shapur begs the people of Ecbatana to spare his face by killing him with their arrows in response. He stated that he would rather die at the hands of his allies than his enemies. They try to shoot at him, but their arrows do not reach the area where he is tied due to the great distance. As he dies, he is startled by the appearance of an arrow, which everyone wonders where it came from. Arslan later has a conversation with Narcissus. During this, he reveals to him that Ecbatana, despite their strong defense, may collapse. He confirms that well-crafted words are all that is required to persuade people. The Queen Mother inquires of the two Marsmans whether her husband, the king, was also beheaded, to which they respond that he was not. She is relieved to learn this. They were greatly disturbed by the Queen's failure to inquire about Arslan. Meanwhile, when Garshasp and Sam notice a slave listening to the Lusitanian language, they correct the slave's behavior. Soon after, someone reports that the slaves are causing a nuisance and are attempting to open the gate. As he charges there, Garshasp becomes increasingly frustrated, killing and injuring many slaves. Sam is concerned and believes that this will cause even more uproar and wild attempts from them. Garshasp appears unconcerned. Everything Sam warns Garshasp about is coming true as the slaves become violent and kill many civilians. A high-ranking official orders Jeev to ensure the queen's safe departure from town. He eventually realizes that she is not the queen and that the queen is one of her maids. The servant tries to flee, but the man in the silver mask chases her down and kills her. The silver mask's ability to infiltrate meant that his armies had infiltrated. This causes a commotion in the city. The city of Ecbatana is taken as a result of the uproar, as the main gate is unlocked and an assault is launched. As the situation worsens, Arslan, Narcissus, and the others flee their homes in search of safety. The Silver Mask takes over the palace and notices that the queen is missing. He directs his soldiers to search for her. Edoyle, on the other hand, goes around disguised as a Lusitanian soldier in search of information about the Lusitanian slaves. Soon after, the soldiers are dispatched to find the prince. He notices a girl being dragged by Lusitanian soldiers while watching the soldiers' match pass by. Surprisingly, by the time he catches up with them, the girl has already killed the soldier. The girl assaults him, and he demands to know her identity. In the heat of the battle, he removes her scarf and discovers that she is, in fact, a boy. This young man appears to be Narcissus' servant, sent by Arslan to investigate the situation in the city. Meanwhile, Jeev meets Ferengis, a stunning priestess who goes by the name Ferengis. She tells him that she has been sent as an emissary by the royal family of Ecbatana to find Prince Arslan. During this time, the Lusitanian army is still fighting fiercely and has launched an assault on the villages in order to reach Arslan. Arslan and his allies, on the other hand, intend to exact revenge on their opponents by attacking them. Arslan is informed about the events in Ecbatana upon Edoil's return from his mission. Meanwhile, Jeev continues to pursue Farangiz and insists on assisting her in her search for the prince. He does this not because he cares, but because Farangiz is beautiful. Arslan's plan appears to be working as he ambushes the enemy soldiers. They fight off the enemy despite their small numbers, making them wonder how many soldiers he has with him. They can finish off the enemy and learn that the king is still alive. Farangiz and Jeev finally find the prince after the battle, and she reveals herself to him. They all decide to infiltrate and spy on the city now, along with the prince. Their main goal was to free the slaves. Later that night, while walking around the city, Daryun runs into the Silver Mask, and they fight. The fight becomes increasingly heated, and Daryun hits the silver mask away from the wearer's face, revealing his identity. He apparently has a burn on his right eye, which forces him to wear the mask. When he realizes his identity has been revealed, he fights Daryun angrily. Fortunately for Daryun, he is aided by Narcissus, and the two of them escape together. Daryun and Narcissus return to the prince, who is now holed up in a cave for his own safety, after completing their mission. Arslan and his companions seek refuge in the Parsian fortress in order to escape those who are pursuing them. After a while, Arslan and his companions realize that Lord Hadir hosted them for reasons that were not entirely clear. They decide to go above and beyond to provide maximum protection against unforeseen events. Fortunately, they can deduce the Lord's plans and repel his attacks. Daryun eventually kills Lord Hadir, forcing his men to stand down and surrender. Lord Silvermask kidnaps Sam and is astounded to discover that despite his severe injuries, Sam is still alive. Lord Silvermask thought Sam was dead. He is approached and asked to serve the Silver Mask, but he politely declines. He swears to the King of Pars that he will always be loyal to him. Sam discovers the man behind the Silver Mask's identity. This makes him feel intimidated and think about what the other man said. Lord Silver Mask appears to be the previous King of Pars. Lord Silver Mask meets with the son of Karlan, who assures him that he will get Arslan and Daryun for him. Meanwhile, Arslan and his party are ambushed and end up in trouble. They do, however, go their separate ways, only to resurface later. Arslan comes to Alam's aid and saves his life just as Lusitanian soldiers are about to kill him. They decide to JPPP into a river after successfully outrunning the enemy. However, as the Lusitanian army approaches, they seek refuge behind a bush. Alam is displeased that Arslan risked his life to save a commoner like him. This type of behavior, according to Arslan, is perfectly natural between close friends. They continue on their journey without further incident. Narcissus is fleeing the people who have previously waged war against him. He runs toward a mountain slope, paying attention to the insistent sound of riders, and he recognizes them. He is soon surrounded by Lord Silver Mask's men. Narcissus is identified by Lord Silver's Mask. Meanwhile, Daryun and Farangiz are occupied with fighting off the enemy soldiers who are constantly attacking them. During the battle, an evil demon aids the enemy and attempts to harm the prince. The lamb, on the other hand, saves the prince just as he is about to fall to the ground. Daryun, enraged that this demon would harm the prince, attacks and kills it. Prince Arslan is relieved to be reunited with Daryun, who is determined to ensure that the prince lives long enough to complete his mission. This was it for today. Subscribe to my channel to watch more recaps.